No Country for Old Men movie review. So first, a bit of a disclaimer, namely that I don't have anything intelligent to say about this movie. I started this movie review project a few years ago as a way to just try and make my movie viewing experience more active. So instead of just kind of passively watching everything, force myself to engage with it and offer some opinions, which I don't regret. But a consequence of that, and especially a consequence of following it rigidly, like reviewing every single movie I see, is that quite often I don't have anything intelligent to say, which is true even for some lowbrow movies. But with a movie like this, yeah, I feel a little bit silly, especially because it's a Coen Brothers movie, and I know there's going to be tons of opinion pieces of this that are going to be much more intelligent than mine. All that being said, I'm just going to throw out what thoughts I do have. I watched this movie, I put this into the DVD player knowing nothing about it, which is probably the best way to approach a Coen Brothers movie. I knew nothing about what the plot would be or what would happen, so everything just unfolded from the standpoint of no expectations. And it was quite interesting to just gradually see the journey where this movie would take me. Which is, I guess, a way of saying that the best way to watch this is spoiler-free. I'm going to give some minor spoilers in this review, so maybe stop watching now if you haven't seen it. Another point is that I think I'm adjusting a little bit to the pace of Coen Brothers movies. The first few I watched, I got very impatient with. By this point, though, I knew that the film was just going to meander along on its own time, and so I just relaxed and didn't get impatient and just let the movie tell its story at its own speed. Another point is that these Coen Brothers movies tend to be very unpredictable, which is a strength. You never know who's going to survive and who's going to die. Any one of the characters feels like they might be vulnerable, which really adds to the suspense of the whole thing. And I mean that in a positive way. However, there is an exception, being that the main bad guy. For a couple of reasons. One, he's got this kind of like the Terminator thing around him. The Terminator being shorthand for like a bad guy that just won't die. You know, like in that first Terminator movie, that robot just would not die no matter what they did to him. The bad guy in this movie has kind of the same aura to him, which I didn't really like, especially because the rest of the movie felt like it had some sort of gritty realism vibe going to it. The fact that this bad guy in the movie was so invulnerable seemed to spoil the vibe of it a little bit. That and just the whole way the plot is structured. Everything revolves around the bad guy. So you know, like, he's not going to die in the middle of the movie. I mean, maybe he might die at the end. But, yeah. It's... That part of the movie was straight up Hollywood movie making. Everything else had kind of like a gritty realism to it. Speaking of which, this movie is set in the American Southwest. I grew up in Michigan, so this is not my world. But the movie does a very good job of making you feel like you're in the middle of the world. It's one of those movies where you can almost feel the sand grit between your teeth. You hear the sand crunch when a character walks. You practically feel the hot sun. And it has a great cast of cowboy-type figures with real leathery-type outdoor faces. Because of the slow pacing of the movie, you get sucked into the setting and you feel like you're hanging out with these characters. Trading Vietnam War stories, wearing cowboy hats as you have another cup of coffee in the diner, etc. Another point. This movie came out, I think, in 2007. I'm fairly sure it takes place in 1980. Now, it's never explicitly stated. Like, they never have, like, those cards where it says, Texas, 1980. Yeah, you know, those titles at the bottom. But there are clues. First of all, the characters are Vietnam veterans, but they're not quite old yet, like they would have been in 2007. They're just middle-aged. And then a bit more of a blatant clue. There's a 1958 coin in the movie, which is referenced as being 22 years old. So, you know, assuming I did the math right, I think that works out to 1980. Why was this movie set in 1980, though? Like, was there some sort of reason that it couldn't have been set in the present day? I mean, the period didn't seem particularly important to the movie. I don't know, maybe I missed something, but why set it in 1980? That's the part I couldn't figure out. What was the importance of the time period to the plot? Or was there one? I don't know. Okay, and then the last point. The camera in this movie is very selective in terms of what it shows and what it doesn't show. Some deaths you see in all their gruesome glory, where others are simply implied. And there are a few that you're left wondering about. Did he kill her? Did he not kill her? What exactly happened at the end? So this is another one of those films that's seeking to subvert expectations by avoiding the typical Hollywood ending with like a happy ending and all the threads neatly tied up. So I guess this is a type of film which would appeal to people who don't like normal Hollywood endings, you know, like the film school type people. Call me a Philistine if you will. I hate these endings. I much prefer a neat Hollywood ending where everything is all wrapped up for me at the end. But in spite of that, I do have to admit that this was a very entertaining film generally. So hopefully you've already seen it if you've been watching this far, because I've been spoiling everything. I've been spoiling some things. If you haven't seen it, I haven't spoiled it completely, and it's well worth watching.